The Mortal Kombat games is one of my favorite franchises of all time. I've played every single one of them, and there is something that I love about every single game. But at the same time, there's something that I don't like about every single game. So today, we're going to stop and break down one thing I love about every title, and one thing I dislike about every title. So, let's get into it.
Fight!
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Nick here, and welcome to, or welcome back to the channel. Wanted to try a new setup here, so please let me know what you think about it. Today we're going to be doing something a little different, and we're going to be looking at every single Mortal Kombat title in release order, talking about my favorite aspect about each title, and as well as my least favorite thing about every single title. To make this a bit interesting, I'm going to try and find some different topics or highlights to talk about, as well as some of the lowlights to make every single entry feel a little different, and make sure that each one of them shines or doesn't shine in their own way. Now, as always, these are just my opinions and my opinions only. We're allowed to agree with each other, and we're also allowed to disagree with each other. Just don't be a jerk about it in the comments, okay? Now with the intro out of the way, let's get into it. Starting things off with Mortal Kombat 1992 or Mortal Kombat Classic. And I think what this game did the best was just its impact on gaming overall. That sounds a little confusing, but let me explain. Man, where do I even start with the impact of Mortal Kombat Classic? In the early days of fighting games, it was one of many titles that revolutionized the genre, with its recognizable legacy characters ranging from Scorpion to Sub-Zero, Kano, Johnny Cage, Liu Kang, Raiden, and Sonya Blade, household names in the Mortal Kombat and fighting game community. So memorable in fact that people even remember the "get over here, finish him in fatality" probably more than hearing Hadouken, Kikoken, and any other Street Fighter catchphrase. Along with that, this has a major impact when it comes to the political scene, being the entire focus of an entire congressional hearing back in the early 90s. And for a game developed by 4 people, this fighting game franchise has a big impact on the gaming scene. If it weren't for Mortal Kombat 1992, we wouldn't have certain games like Killer Instinct and many other imitators. I'm about to sound like a broken record, but this game had an entire impact on the fighting game community. Kudos to Mortal Kombat Classic. Now, with all that said, if there's one thing that Mortal Kombat Classic does not so well, is it doesn't hold up the best. Of all of the titles, I think it holds up the absolute worst. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that this game is bad. I don't want you to think that. What I'm saying is, when you compare it to the original arcade trilogy and compare it to the rest of the franchise, it has aged the weakest due to its mechanics, clunky controls. The combat isn't the best, but it has been established, and it's a pretty good starting ground, I can say. So when you play this on the MK Arcade Collection on the Xbox 360, rest in peace to the Microsoft Store, play it at an arcade 1-up, or if you're fortunate enough to go to a barcade and play this, it does feel the clunkiest of the trilogy. So if you are going to go to an arcade and play either 1, 2, or 3, you can definitely skip the first one. I'm not saying it's bad, it just doesn't hold up the best over time. Moving on to the next title, Mortal Kombat 2. And if there's one thing that I love about this, is that it actually improved almost everything over the first game. First one I can say is the roster. MK Classic gave us 7 fighters, and then MK2 improved it by giving us 12 diverse fighters that all play very different. On top of that, this introduced us to more fan favorite characters, including Kitana and Mileena. And even characters introduced into the first game have been heavily flushed out, like Liu Kang and Johnny Cage. They're even better than before. We also have more secret fights in comparison to MK Classic, now fighting Jade and Noob Saibot. Now, Kintaro may be a step down in comparison to Goro, but it's still an awesome fight. Also, fighting Shao Kahn at the end is just absolutely wonderful. Defeating that smack talker really just brings a huge smile to my face. Along with that, more characters have iconic special moves that have been introduced in every game that they've appeared in. And the biggest improvement over the first game, the fatalities. These are so amazing. A lot more splashes of blood and gore. No wonder that these were introduced as brutalities in Mortal Kombat 11. When it comes to sequels, this is definitely one of the best ones. Now, as much as I love MK2, I do think that there's one thing that does bog it down a little bit, and it really does ruin sometimes that arcade experience for me. That is the unfair ladder AI. When it comes to playing the arcade ladder of this game, it is extremely unfair, and that's because the AI is just really unfair and it knows exactly what you're gonna do. Sure, the first fight may be easy and over with quickly, but as soon as you get to the second fight, they're countering over your uppercuts, able to grab cancel you out of special moves, pretty much mind read everything that you are going to do, and the worst insult of all, if they defeat you on a stage with the stage finisher, they are going to perform it on you. This is honestly a sign of the times because back in the day, this is how they got more people to pay quarters in the arcades, and honestly, it's really annoying, even going to a barcade that I'm familiar with. The only way to get a real edge of MK2's ladder is you have to cheese every single fight and know how to defeat them, which involves a lot of back jumping, then forward jumping, followed by a special move, such as Jax doing his air grab to bait them into it, and he can get them into an annoying loop. Honestly, it's just exploiting the ladder to win, which feels a little cheesy. Despite that, I still consider this to be one of the best Mortal Kombat games of all time. I still praise everything heavily that I said before, but this is just one of those annoying things that just highlights the sign of the times of the arcade. Up next on our list is the third game in the series, Mortal Kombat 3. And I think what this game did the best was actually implementing a true combo system. It's honestly weird to think it took until Mortal Kombat 3 for a true combo system to be introduced. Sure, some people were able to pull off some unique combos in Mortal Kombat 2 by juggling some projectiles or doing some special moves into special moves, or getting people into weird juggles. However, Mortal Kombat 3 actually introduced a system where you can do punch, punch, kick, and yeah, well, you get what I mean, as I tripped over my own tongue. I also love how satisfying it is to pull these combos off as the entire screen shakes and blood flies everywhere. As you may have guessed by now, ever since Mortal Kombat 3, a combo system with varying styles and mechanics have been implemented into every title. Thank this game for introducing that. Moving right along to the negative of Mortal Kombat 3 Vanilla, that being the poor launch roster of this version of the game. It's crazy to think when people think of Mortal Kombat 3, their brains immediately go to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which is actually the second port of this game. One of the biggest ways you can tell that this is the non-ultimate version is by looking at the roster. Seriously, what the hell is up with this thing? Now, it's cool that we have 14 characters this time around, 2 more than Mortal Kombat 2, but half the roster is returning characters and the other half are newbies. That's not a problem, but we are missing some of the coolest legacy characters. Where's Scorpion? Where's Masked Sub-Zero? The ninjas are replaced with the cyber ninjas, being Cyrax and Sector. Nothing wrong with them, I just wish that we got some of the traditional ninjas back too. Along with that, this is where they introduced one of my least favorite characters into the series, that being Stryker. This is also the game that introduced Cabal, who was the most busted character, and he was busted in every single revision of this game. Seriously, you could easily clean sweep the entire ladder by just doing this one combo that did about 80 to 90% damage. Thankfully, the upgraded version would fix this issue, but looking back at Mortal Kombat 3, geez, this is kind of a weird and disappointing roster. Later in the same year, we were blessed with another version of Mortal Kombat 3, being Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And I think the biggest improvement this game did was adding much more fan favorite and beloved characters. Yeah, no big surprise here. The biggest improvement over the original is by including some fan favorite characters, as I just complained about. Not only do we get Scorpion and classic Sub-Zero, we also get the inclusion of some more classic ninjas, being Reptile, Kitana, and Mileena, along with new fighters such as Ermac, Jade, and Cyber Smoke. All of these characters play absolutely wonderful, and their inclusion really saved the game. This upgrade is what made Mortal Kombat 3 Vanilla quickly forgotten, and this was the preferred way to play the game. Now moving on to my negative with Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and yes, it could be the same for MK3, but I wanted to have a different flaw for that one. Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3's biggest misstep for me is still the inclusion of some slapsticky and goofy fatalities that just aren't that great if you ask me. Now, I could have made this the issue with Mortal Kombat 3, but all of these issues stand out a lot more in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. I've gone on record saying that I really don't like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3's fatalities or Mortal Kombat 3's fatalities that much. I know the approach was to make it less serious and more goofy, but in my opinion, I think that they went a little too far with the goofy side. Everyone explodes with 18 rib cages, 14 arms, and 3 skulls, and a lot of the fatalities feel like there's just Three Stooges episodes with a lot more blood. Animalities are sure an awesome idea, stemming from the idea that Scorpion could turn into a scorpion and kill his opponent, but in execution, all of the animalities in this game are nearly identical, and none of them really stand out other than the animal they turn into. They all pretty much get mauled in the exact same way, except for a handful of characters. For that reason alone, it's actually what made me not want to do all animalities ranked for MK3. Thank God for the Chaos Reigns update so I can do a proper animalities ranked video. But for me, when it comes to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 and the inclusion of characters and the updated combo system, it's a little disappointing the fatalities didn't get much of an upgrade.
Moving on to the next title in the franchise, that being Mortal Kombat Trilogy. And I think the best thing this game did was be the definitive version of the game.
Man, talk about a massive upgrade over MK3 and Ultimate MK3. This feels like a big celebration of the entire arcade era. I mean, just look at the roster. An entire roster of 32 characters with secret fighters and the bosses now playable. Honestly, that's just an awesome treat. Rarely do we see fighting games do that, and it's always something special when they do it. And what makes it even more special is that you get to play as the MK2 version of some of the characters, or even MK Classic version of some characters, and instead of making them feel like they just play awkward where they just would feel like themselves from that game just placed into Trilogy, they actually went out of their way to make them feel like they fit the universe, adding some extra frames and some animation in there. Along with that, I absolutely love the aggressor mode and how cool that is, making your character move faster and hit a little harder. This just feels like a major celebration of the entire arcade trilogy, hence should be your go-to if you're interested in playing the MK original trilogy.
Now, as much as I love Mortal Kombat Trilogy and how much I think it's one of the best games in the entire franchise, I really wish a lot of people got to experience it. So, moving into my negative of this game is that it got no love or attention ever since it was released.
Honestly, how did this not ever get ported to anything lately? For being one of the best Mortal Kombat games, it hasn't gotten a re-release since it launched in 1996. We did get the MK Arcade Collection back in 2012, and say what you want about that, it is a little disappointing if you ask me, but I was really hoping to see MK Trilogy get involved in that. I made an entire point covering this in my MK Hot Takes video, but it's honestly really disappointing that the team hasn't done anything with MK Trilogy since it came out. It rightfully deserves it. Either do an arcade 1-up or just port it to Series X and PS5. That would be awesome. Please give it the love and attention it deserves. WB Discovery, please do it and I'll be a happy man.
Moving on to the next title in the franchise and the jump to 3D, being Mortal Kombat 4. My favorite thing that this game did was the weapon combat.
After 5 Mortal Kombat games, we've been fighting people with our fists and some special abilities. Now imagine how cool it would be if they were allowed to bring weapons into the ring, and that's what Mortal Kombat 4 did. Sure, it may not be the most balanced and it may be a bit janky, but come on, this is just super cool. Even though Mortal Kombat was still owned by Midway at this point, they are pulling some Looney Tunes logic here, such as Raiden just pulling a giant warhammer out of his belt, or Quan Chi summoning a spiked mace, or you have Sub-Zero summoning his ones. Okay, they're not all winners. Now, this may not be the most groundbreaking or revolutionary feature, but it was cool to see characters finally duke it out with some weapons, something that would be heavily improved in Deadly Alliance and Deception.
And similar with Mortal Kombat 3, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy, or at least some of it, my least favorite thing about Mortal Kombat 4 isn't really slapstick fatalities, it's more that this game has terrible fatalities in general.
Whoo, boy, man, aren't these just disappointing. If you've been watching all fatalities ranked by character on this channel, you'll know that I am not a big fan of the fatalities from this game. A lot of them feel a little lazy and they look really bad over time. Since this was the first 3D Mortal Kombat fighting game, they decided to recreate some of the classic fatalities, with the twist being it's now in 3D. The problem is it's dated 3D and it looks really bad. Also, for whatever reason, whenever any character gets bisected, gets a limb ripped off, or their head yanked off, the fountain of blood sound is extremely annoying to listen to. You can either look at the terribly animated fatalities or listen to the annoying sounds of blood. It's so annoying, in fact, that if you're gonna play this game, just avoid doing fatalities. There's no treat in it whatsoever.
Now, let's take a break from some of the mainline games for a little bit and look at our first spin-off title, that being Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. And probably my favorite thing this game did was attempting to tell a narrative-focused story featuring my boy, Sub-Zero. Have him off camera, but
here he is. In every Mortal Kombat arcade title, the only snippet of a story we got was just looking at the screens before he inserted coins, and then see the ending of the characters to find out what happens when they win. If you didn't watch the cartoons, watch the movie, or read any of the comics, you wouldn't be too familiar with a lot of the story of this game. Now, a cool thing this game did was try to tell a fun narrative focusing on Sub-Zero before the events of Mortal Kombat Classic. Now, it may not be the best story, as a lot of the acting has dated horribly, and it's quite entertaining. Maybe that could be a fun reaction video for Rain and I don't know, let me know. But it's cool that they put in a lot of effort to actually have a fun story mode that's actually part of Mortal Kombat's legacy. As I've mentioned, it's not the best story, but it's cool that this is the first one that implemented a big story mode focusing on the lore of the tournament and the characters. Also, big bonus points for covering my favorite character in the franchise, Sub-Zero. Now, I could be totally biased and say this game is perfect with no flaws because it's covering my favorite character in the entire franchise and one of my favorite characters in all of gaming. But unfortunately, I don't live in a world like that, and I'm not that type of person, because the worst thing about this game are the terrible controls. Now, if you're looking at gameplay of this game, you may think that it will just play a lot like a Mortal Kombat arcade fighting game, just with some side-scrolling elements in it. And if you thought that, you are horribly wrong. For whatever reason, they decided to add some RPG elements with some platforming, which doesn't work well with this gameplay style. Along with that, getting into group fights is an absolute nightmare because you have to press a button to swap around it and look around. You don't have your traditional inputs to do special moves. You have to hold a button and press one of the face buttons. So if you've been playing a lot of the arcade games, this gets really confusing really fast. This wouldn't be a problem if it were a beat 'em up, but this is just looking like a side scroller, which looks really weird. And when you finally do get to a big boss fight on a one-on-one with either Scorpion Fujin or many of the boss fights, it still has that crappy platforming combat. It just plays extremely terrible. Just stick with the comics if you want to know more about the story. Playing this game really isn't worth it in the end. Now let's jump away from spin-offs and back to mainline games, with the updated version of Mortal Kombat 4 being MK Gold. And similar to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, I have a similar favorite thing about it, and that's the inclusion of some fan favorite characters. Yeah, I know I'm sounding like a broken record repeating the same positive thing about another Mortal Kombat game, but hear me out, I think this really helped save the game a bit too. Going from 15 to 20 fighters was a huge upgrade. Those new characters being Cyrax, Mileena, Kung Lao, Kitana, and Baraka. It's always a good time to have those characters included into some arcade fun action. There's not really a whole lot else I can say. I'm not the biggest fan of Mortal Kombat 4/Gold, but at least this was a big improvement. Even though this game did a lot to save it a little bit by including some fan favorite characters and making the game a little bit more fun, there is still one big issue with the game, and that's the cutscenes. I just did an entire video about it, so we're gonna relive some of them and talk about them again here. I just talked about these in a recent video with Rain as we reacted to all of the endings from this game. And if you want to see some terribly dated CGI endings, then here you go. This game has them for you. All of these are unintentionally hilarious, they look really bad, and some of the endings are just downright funny for the odd pacing, terrible voice acting, and just the moments that happen in them. They're so bad they're good, and if you just want to watch a video of us laughing at them the whole time, here you go and check out the time card up here. We're looking at our second spin-off on here, that being Mortal Kombat Special Forces. And my favorite thing that this game did is... it tried? Okay, let's just get to the fun part about this entry. The worst thing about Mortal Kombat Special Forces is everything about it. Go figure, it's considered one of the worst games ever made. Yeah, where to begin with this one? This game is just outright terrible. As I talked about in all MK games ranked, spoiler alert, this game was at the very bottom. The gameplay is extremely terrible, the models look really bad, the voice acting is terrible, and all of the issues that took place behind the scenes are really showcased with the launch product. Ed Boon has gone on record saying that he could write an entire novel about the developmental issues of this game. Many publications and other YouTube channels have listed this in their worst PS1 games of all time. Honestly, I kind of agree. Now that we're done looking at the worst game in the franchise, now let's move on to the next mainline game in the franchise, that being Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. And my favorite thing that this game did was introduce the 3 fight style system, which is pretty solid if you ask me. Between MK Gold and MK Deadly Alliance was the biggest gap between mainline titles. As they were switching to new hardware, we were introduced to a big innovation for the time, that being fighting styles. Every character you choose has 3 ways of fighting, 2 fight styles and 1 weapon, something that carried over from MK Gold. And what made this really cool is that you could switch in the middle of combat. This was really revolutionary at the time, and I still think it's really cool when I go back and revisit this game. You can do a lot of cool combos switching in between fight styles in one single combo. It's really cool stuff, something that I wish I was a lot better at when I first played this game growing up. It was cool to see this introduced into the 3D era Mortal Kombat games on the PS2. You can say what you want about all the weird characters, but you can't deny that this is one of the big highlights.
For as much fun Deadly Alliance is, it's not perfect in terms of its presentation, so unfortunately, my least favorite thing about it are the fatalities, or actually the fact that they lock each character to having 1 fatality, which is pretty disappointing.
Yes, similar to Mortal Kombat 4, Mortal Kombat 3, and Gold, I'm not the biggest fan of the fatalities in this game. As a matter of fact, I'm not the biggest fan that they limited it to 1 fatality per character. With all of the dev time focused onto reinventing the fighting game system with the 3 styles and the weapons and the big 3D environment you're allowed to play around in, the fatalities took a big step back if you ask me. Either many of them don't fit the character, they sometimes drag on too long, or they're just not that good in general. Some of it admittedly is because the team was rushed and they didn't have enough time to create unique fatalities. Quan Chi's next stretch is a prime example, but at least they got the tech and the engine figured out, so when Deception came around, they managed to fix the fatalities with a full swing. It's also weird to see that they go back to the MK 1992 trend and just give everyone 1 fatality instead. Again, that's due to time constraints. Overall, not the worst fatalities in the franchise, but in terms of quality and number, they're far from the best.
Moving on to Deadly Alliance's direct sequel, that being Mortal Kombat Deception. Now, a lot of the great things like the 3 fight system do carry over into Deception, and it's much better. However, there's one thing that they did that's absolutely my favorite, are all the fun bonus modes.
Now, as much as I could admit that the story mode or conquest is amazing, along with the improved gameplay and amazing roster could be my favorite things about this game, it's actually not what makes it the most memorable title for me. For me, what I remember most is either chess combat or puzzle combat. If you wanted to make the game a little bit more interesting with another friend, you were allowed to play the Mortal Kombat version of chess where each piece of the chessboard can be a character instead. A really cool concept I'd love to see return. Along with that was puzzle combat. It's no Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, but it's still a fun time if you want to kill time with someone who's not the best at fighting games or the biggest into Mortal Kombat. It's just Tetris with some chibi characters and a lot more blood and gore. I have fond memories playing Mortal Kombat Unchained, the PSP version of Deception, with my brother on long car rides or vacations. It was also fitting that we would just get rid of every character or every pawn on the board and leave it with just our kings going at it, fittedly being Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Overall, these modes are just so awesome, and I'd love to see them return or get some love in a future Mortal Kombat title or in an upcoming MK1 patch. That would be awesome.
Even though I consider Deception to be a huge improvement over Deadly Alliance, my least favorite thing actually comes to the design of the game, and that a lot of the character costumes either range from being good to pretty bad. A lot of them rank really low on my rankings, and it's pretty much widespread for the entire roster.
This is a bit nitpicky, I know, but I don't think a lot of the character designs in this are really good. Oddly enough, it's really a 50-50. Either characters look really good or they just look really off. Take for an example, my favorite character, Sub-Zero. Peak design with his main base design, but when you look at his alternate, what the hell did they do? Shao Kahn? Yep, he looks like Shao Kahn. Alternate? He's discount Batman. Scorpion's base design, over-designed as hell. His alternate design, awesome. When it comes to all costumes ranked, a lot of the costumes from this either go really high or they go really low. There's no in-between with this one. I don't know, I'm really scratching the bottom of the surface. I love Deception a lot, I just don't like a lot of the character models.
Moving on to our third and final console spin-off, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. This is one of my favorite video games of all time, so it was hard to pick just one thing, but the one thing that I think this game does the best is that it nails the beat 'em up style of the game, and it perfectly fits Mortal Kombat
Like, it makes it just feel so seamless and perfect. I absolutely love it. If you were gonna tell me that a Mortal Kombat spin-off was going to be a beat-em-up focusing on Liu Kang and Kung Lao, two characters I never really cared about that much, I would have said no thanks, I think I'm good. Oh, you silly, silly child, Nick. I ended up giving Shaolin Monks a try at my cousin's place growing up, and let me tell you, this was one of the best experiences I had with Mortal Kombat, thanks to the beat-em-up system for the story mode. This game ditches side-scroll fighting like they did with MK Mythologies, and whatever they did with Special Forces, and went with a semi-open world beat-em-up style to the game, similar to something like God of War. Having two people run around, beat up a bunch of people, throw them into traps, doing fatalities, brutalities, multalities on people, it's just awesome. On top of that, you're running around and roaming and fighting in these environments that we've been familiar with. It's just so cool. Honestly, it's just so good. Damn it, just give us a remake or a port of this game. I will literally give you my blood for this. Anything to play this beat 'em up game one more time on a modern platform with some friends, please. Now, as I mentioned, talking about my favorite thing about this game, I really had to be nitpicky when it came to my least favorite aspect about this game, but if I really had to be nitpicky and scratch the bottom of the barrel here, it's that there is no drop in or drop out for the co-op story mode, and the versus mode is pretty disappointing. I really am being nitpicky with this one, but I honestly am a little disappointed that if you are going to be playing the story mode with a friend, you can't do drop in or drop out. That meaning that if you start it with a friend, you have to fully commit to playing that with a friend. Or if you're playing solo, you can't have a friend join you, which got really annoying if I played this with friends or my brother, as in I'd either have to stop the story mode I'm doing and have to start a new save file. Or if I got really far with a friend and I realized I never had a local save for just myself, I'd have to restart just playing alone instead. And another nitpicky thing, if you are playing local versus, it's not the best. All of the stages feel a little weird, they're all small, and it's weird that there's a lot of environmental hazards. It just doesn't feel like it was fully finished or there yet. Yet again, I am scratching the bottom of the barrel with this one. Moving on to the final, or intended to be the final game in the franchise, with Mortal Kombat Armageddon, and the thing that this game did the best was the create a combatant mode. If you ever had a dream about creating your own OC in the Mortal Kombat franchise, well, this game let you do it, and let me tell you, they nailed it. The amount of customization you get in this is extremely overwhelming, both for your character design and special moves you want to give them, including weapons and style too. You get to use nearly every single weapon in the entire roster, and nearly every fighting style. Almost all of the special moves are there. It's just a wonderful treat. So if you ever imagined wanting to make yourself Tremor a playable character, you now can. If you ever wanted to make Hydro a character in this, you can. Or if you wanted to make your own Mortal Kombat OCs like my brother, cousin, and I did, you can. This was such a cool feature back in the day, and I'm honestly surprised it never came back. And after seeing Street Fighter 6's Avatar feature, I'd really like to see this come back into future Mortal Kombat. I think the time is right, but for now, let's just remember the coolest thing about Armageddon. Even though this game was intended to be the final send-off for the entire Mortal Kombat series, by including everybody, unfortunately I think that's its biggest weakness. Every character just feels gimmicky, as it's just an asset dump, and no one really feels that special. Don't get me wrong, having every single character in this game is a fun treat. Rarely do we see fighting games with 62 characters on the roster. Smash Brothers doesn't count. But including every single Mortal Kombat character is a cool treat. But unfortunately, that does come at a cost. Sure, you have the legacy characters who do play like themselves in some way, but some of the extra characters don't feel fully fleshed out. For one, they limit every character to just one style and one weapon. Obviously, that's due to data restrictions, but for whatever reason, it doesn't feel the most special or impressive if you ask me. Now, if you want to include the big beast characters, they all feel pretty similar. The only difference is that maybe one of them has a different special move over the other. Onaga and Blaze almost feel the exact same outside of their special moves. Personally, if you ask me, it just feels like every character feels very similar except for one or two things, and the other thing being that they just dressed up like the character they're supposed to resemble. It's awesome to see everyone from Mortal Kombat is here, but it isn't truly satisfying at the end of the day. Next on our list, things are getting super by looking at Mortal Kombat vs. DC. And the one thing that this game nailed is having a Say what you want about this game, and a lot of people have, but if there's one thing this game did really good was deliver a pretty fun story. Now, it may not be some Oscar-worthy writing. I mean, there's a lot of hilarious moments in there if you want to check those out, but honestly, this really laid the foundation for the future of MK's story presentation. We rarely ever saw fighting games include story modes in the game, and even though MK vs. DC is far from being the best Mortal Kombat game, the one thing that it does really well is this story. Having you go through both sides of the conflict, see where they converge, and then having a fun boss fight at the end fighting a merger of the two big bads in this game. Honestly, it's really funny that this laid the blueprint for how they would do story modes later down the line, and then you see other fighting game studios try to replicate what they're doing. You just gotta thank the weirdest game in the franchise being Mortal Kombat vs. DC.
Alright, it's not much of a surprise, but my least favorite thing about Mortal Kombat vs. DC are the—
Hey, rewrite time here. I wish I recorded new footage for this, but it was already too late when I was in the recording booth. I actually changed my mind on the worst thing about Mortal Kombat vs. DC. What I find to be the new worst thing is actually the combo trials. Those can go to hell and burn. Combo trials in usual fighting games are supposed to teach you how to play the game going from beginner to advanced with each character. This game, for whatever reason, makes it feel like you're trying out for Evo. All of these are insanely hard to pull off, especially with those pro moves. The timing is off, and this is still using the 3D system, and it feels clunkier than before. Whoever thought this was a good idea should have a stern talking to. They shouldn't be fired, that's not a good thing. Overall, combo trials, they can go to hell. They're terrible.
Moving on to consider the best game in the entire franchise, Mortal Kombat 9. And my favorite thing about this game—
correction, it's everything. After going through the arcade era and then the 3D era and then back to MK vs. DC crossover goofiness, it felt like it was right to do a reboot with Mortal Kombat. And that's actually what saved the franchise. What's the best way of rebooting it? Going back to its roots. Let me tell you, going back to that was actually the best decision they've ever made. Not only are we back to 2D fighting, or 2.5D as its 3D characters in a 2D environment, gameplay has been heavily updated and everything just feels so fine-tuned. Almost every single special move for the arcade trilogy is back and reinvented, along with plenty of new special moves added here and there. Just when you think that Mortal Kombat was dead, you end up watching E3 2010 and you're shown this off, you realize there's hope left in the universe. Honestly, this game is what made me excited to be a Mortal Kombat fan and helped me get other friends into the franchise.
Now, even though that this game was ranked #1 of all Mortal Kombat games, there is a few things that do hold it back from being a perfect game, and one of my least favorite things about it, if I had to choose a least favorite, is this Sindel moment in the Mortal Kombat story.
Yeah, I know this is something many people in the community have an issue with, that being the moment in the MK9 story with Sindel. Spoiler to those who haven't played this game, but the moment in the story where all of the main fighters are inside the church and a charged up Sindel after taking over Shang Tsung's souls comes in and sweeps nearly everyone in the roster. Many of the fighters dying in either brutal ways or just, wait, really? Are you kidding me? kind of ways. Like, how did Sub-Zero just take an uppercut and then just die from that? But it is cool to see a stiletto go through the neck and stab Jax. But it's just really disappointing seeing all of these fan favorite characters we love get reinvented in a really cool way just for them to die in the end. It would have been nice if their death had served a purpose, but it ended up leading to the Revenant arc in MKX and MK11, which is something many of us want to forget about. So, long story short, this moment just led to some really weird story moments in the next two games, thanks to overpowered Sindel.
Now it's time to go to Mortal Kombat X, and my favorite thing about this game is the amazing gameplay. Dare I say, it's hot take. It's the best gameplay in the entire series.
The one thing I praise most about MKX is the gameplay. Before Mortal Kombat 11 came out, I actually revisited this and played this for months and months. And let me tell you, I completely forgot how awesome the gameplay was in this. It's so smooth, so fun, and there's so much you can do in this game. On top of that, all the matchups feel like there's so much you can do because of the variation system. Probably one of the coolest things they've introduced, where every character feels so unique in different ways. You want to have a Scorpion that has more of a sword-based one? Choose Ninjutsu. You want to choose a Takeda that focuses more on his whips? Choose Lasher. You want to choose a Predator that focuses a lot on his weapons? Use Hishkiten. There's so much you could do with each of the variations. It just makes it so fun. Literally, labbing this game is probably one of the most fun things you can do. You can probably find some new things you never knew were possible. That's why I love watching a lot of highlights and matchups from this game. There's so much stuff that I never knew was possible. The gameplay is just that good. It's not that it feels like like it's janky or it just doesn't feel polished, it's probably the most polished game in the series. Of the NRS era, this is the one that nailed the gameplay the best if you ask me.
Now, for as much as I love Mortal Kombat X and how high it ranked on all Mortal Kombat games ranked, there is one big issue that I have with this game, and the thing that I like least about this game is the bad story presentation. Not a bad story, just how it's presented as a whole. Now, what I mean about bad presentation is not that the story is bad, it's just how it flows as a whole. This game does do something unique, and it goes for a time jump, explaining stuff that happens right after MK9's story, some parts that take place at a different time, some parts that take place 20 years later. However, the problem is it keeps jumping back and forth constantly, so it's hard to get a constant flow of figuring out what's going on, especially at some points like Takeda's chapter, where it focuses on one fight and then it jumps back to him fighting Kenshi and Hanzo Hisashi during his training. It just feels like these chapter fights feel like they're just meant to explain the character's backstory a little bit more instead of flow out the story a little better. On top of that, this is where they also aggressively push the MKX comic line too, which heavily tied into the story of this game. So if you didn't read many of the comics, you may be a little bit mixed and confused on stuff that's going on. Sure, if you read the entire comic line, which is something I haven't done yet, but I've heard many people who have, and play the story of this game, you get a complete package and people say it's a good story. But if you ask me, it's just how it's presented is what its biggest weakness is. If they decided to make the story just more linear instead, I think I would have liked it a little bit more. Amazing game overall, but when it comes to its story progression and pacing, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. Moving on to the next title in the franchise, being Mortal Kombat 11. Say what you want about this game, and a lot of people have, but the best thing that this game did was provide a wonderful level of customization for every single character. Alright, many people have complained about Mortal Kombat 11 and how it's a big step down from MK9 and MKX, but the one thing it nailed was the customization. Hell, the customization alone is what inspired all costumes ranked. It may not be as in-depth as Injustice 2's gear system, but from what we were provided, it's definitely a cool inclusion to the series. Have you ever wanted to change up Scorpion's mask, or change up his costume, or even his sword and spear? This game lets you do it. On top of that, they did it with the guest characters too. Even though it's kinda limited due to the licensor, it's still really cool they included that for them. Ever wanted to change up their intro animation? This game lets you do it. For how much customization this game offered, it's really disappointing in comparison to Mortal Kombat 1. I guess you never know how good you had it until it's gone or heavily modified. The biggest bright spot for me was definitely the gear system. Even though grinding some of it out was annoying, it was definitely rewarding at the end of the day. Also made for a fun series too, which you can check out the playlist above. Moving on to the most disappointing and least favorite thing about Mortal Kombat 11, something that a lot of people in the community share, is the disappointing gameplay. It's a huge step down from MKX and MK9. Earlier when I mentioned that this was a step down from MK9 and MKX, the biggest thing here is the gameplay. In comparison to what you could do in MK9 and X in comparison to 11, it feels like there's a lot less available. For one, the gameplay speed is slowed down quite a bit. I don't have a problem with slower fighters, but in comparison to how fast the action was in the last two games, it's really noticeable when you watch it here. Along with that, even though you were able to customize your own variations with special moves, they don't really lead to extensive or impressive combos. The gameplay meta was really just waiting for a punish and just getting an overwhelming amount of damage from a crushing blow. Combo strings felt a lot shorter, and it feels like they just turned into enders instead of opening up for more strings. Along with that, a similar issue to Injustice 2, there are way too many characters that prioritize or specialize in projectiles. Literally all RoboCop used was just his gun, Aaron Black had a lot of stuff that involved using guns, and Cetrion was annoying as she could just play keep away with either ground slams or just throwing rocks at you the whole match. It just got extremely annoying when it turned into a game of keep away every match. Even though the visuals look absolutely amazing in this game, along with it having some amazing customization to go with it, the gameplay took a major step down. Now moving on to the latest Mortal Kombat game on this list, Mortal Kombat 1. There's been a lot of discussion in the community about this game. A lot of people have said some positives, and a lot of people have said a lot of negatives. If there's one thing that I've said that this game did best, is
actually deliver a wonderful roster at launch. I honestly would like to say, as of Mortal Kombat 9 to MK1, it's the best modern Mortal Kombat roster. Say what you want about Mortal Kombat 1, and many people did, but I think the one thing it nailed at launch and currently is the roster. Think about it, for the first time since MK9, this roster included no new original characters. They're all just legacy characters in some way. Even characters who have been reinvented are still legacy characters, which is nice to see them get reworked in some way. Along with that, even though that some people are divisive on cameos, it's nice that some more legacy characters that don't really have a purpose in the story, or if they just wanted them to take a break as a main series character, are still being represented in some way, all in their classic fashion. On top of that, the main roster characters they selected were great picks overall. I really have no complaints to that. Even if they don't play the best, it just depends on who you pair them with cameo-wise. Every character can be super good. You can really change a matchup just depending on which character or cameo you choose, and that's what I really like about MK1. There's just a fun mix-up of having a character and a fun assist to aid you in battle. Definitely my favorite thing about this game. Conversely, my least favorite thing about this, and everyone's least favorite thing about this game, Invasions mode. It is probably the biggest disappointment when it comes to extra features and extra modes in any recent Mortal Kombat title. Leading up to Mortal Kombat's launch, we were told all about this big mode called Invasions, and all of the games that we've been playing leading up to this one have had some fun game mode on the side, like the Living Towers with MKX and a wonderful online. The Living Towers once again made a return in Mortal Kombat 11, along with a very expansive crypt, and with the crypt leaving us for Mortal Kombat 1, this was the mode that was supposed to get us all of these wonderful rewards, Invasions mode, and unfortunately it gets really stale and boring really fast. All of the fights get super repetitive and you get overpowered really quickly unless you get to a boss fight, and that's when it finally feels like a regular fight, but you either blow through them super fast or they just go on for so long because they have all of these annoying modifiers. Along with that, the seasonal rewards aren't the best either. Now I am planning on doing a video of covering all the seasons and ranking them for the first year, and unfortunately a lot of the rewards you get either are just different color shaders for characters, or the cosmetics look absolutely terrible. The game just gets repetitive, it gets grindy, and honestly the only reason I played it so much was just to get to the end to get the really cool reward and exclusive skin that's gonna get locked in that dragon shrine. I know many people were disappointed with this mode, and so was I. Of all of the extra modes we got in the future Mortal Kombat titles, Invasions easily is the worst one. For that, this is the worst thing about Mortal Kombat 1. So there you have my favorite and least favorite aspect about every single Mortal Kombat game. We're not gonna agree on this, but I'd love to hear where you're coming from. What's your favorite and least favorite thing about every single Mortal Kombat game? Be sure to drop that down below and let's have a fun discussion down there. As always, my list is not the right list, my pointers aren't the perfect pointers, they're just my opinions, and I'd love to hear what you have to say down below. Let's have a fun conversation, let's just not be mean down there, okay? As I've mentioned in the community tab and at the end of some videos, I'm trying to do some fun filler videos in between big rankings, and this is just one thing that I thought about doing, and I wanted to do a fun new setup here, so if this is something you like, please let me know. Your feedback truly means a ton to me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and share. Your contribution to this channel truly means a ton, and I can't thank you enough for your continuous support. Speaking of rankings, don't forget to come back next week, as we're going to be covering both Cyrax and Sector on all costumes ranked, along with a special guest, so stay tuned for some updates there. Again, thank you so much for your continuous support. My name is Nick, and I hope you have a smooth rest of your day.
Fight!